Hello, everybody, and welcome to PowerViews Live. I'm Dan McDade, your host and president of PointClear. I'll introduce my guest in just a moment, but first, just a few housekeeping items to go over. You can use the Q&A box on your right for any questions, and I will try to handle the questions as they come up to the extent that I can. Wanted to let you know that the recorded presentation will be available for replay within about 48 hours, usually sooner than that, and a link will be sent to all registrants. I want you to stick around for the after party if you have a few minutes, and if we have additional questions, be about 30. We'll end about 1:30, but we'll stick around for a few more questions. And the PowerPoint is available. If you go to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can pick up the PowerPoint. And also, if you want to use hashtag PowerViewsLive for any tweets, that would be great. I first want to introduce Linda Richardson. Linda is a best-selling author with 10 books, including the recent release, Changing the Sales Conversation, which we'll be talking about today. She's also the founder of Richardson, an internationally recognized sales training and performance improvement company. Linda, I want to welcome you to PowerViews Live.
Dan, pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks for joining me today. And I also wanted to say that you're really credited with introducing consultative selling to the world. And the new book talks about changing the sales conversation. Do you think consultative selling is still relevant today?
Consultative selling, yes, remains highly relevant. When I first began working on sales improvement, the mode of selling was product-centric, generic product stories. And I realized that things had progressed and it was time for a new approach. And hence came consultative selling, which is a need-based. And the big transition was from product-focused to customer need-focused. And we thought that was the golden age. You know, what could be better? We're meeting the needs of the client. We're bringing customized solutions to them. We can have win-win situations. We hit the target perfectly, we thought, but the target moved, and in came the And that period lasted over 3 decades. And consultative selling still is very important because it deals with understanding the customer's needs, but the customer's needs have changed. The internet has changed selling radically. The new buyer has an unprecedented amount of information, access to an unprecedented amount of information and resources and options. So the buyer has changed, and therefore the seller must change. And it's a big change. It's not just tweaking for most salespeople. But the good news is if you're a good consultative salesperson, you have a wonderful foundation, and the new conversation is basically an extension of that conversation, not a replacement.
Well, let's jump into the book here. I have a couple of quotes that I want to read. I want to read them because I don't want to mess anything up here. But it's right now the book talks about it's not about how to sell, but how to sell differently. And it's not what you know about your product that clients value, but it's what you can do with what you know to solve their business problems that they value. Why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, the big transition, Dan, the enormous transition is the switch from solving product issues to producing business results. And for salespeople to do that, it's not only how they sell, it's what they sell is different. Because many of the methodologies that were tried and true and proven and effective for decades are obsolete. And many of them, if salespeople continue to use those processes, they're going to fail. They simply are not relevant. But if they can make the transition and really understand that customers have a whole entire new set of needs, customers still need salespeople, but they need them for something else. They don't need them for a product story. In the past, the salesperson's job pretty much was to bring that product solution and show that that solution is superior to another. And that's just the basics now. Really, customers want to talk about business challenges and business outcomes.
Are there other comments on the slide, the new buyer empowered, that you want to comment on?
Yes, you know, this is the new buyer, and anybody out there that's selling will recognize these characteristics. But what's really important about them is each and every one of those characteristics is driving how salespeople have to change how they sell. For example, customers online, and they are doing their research, and they're very independent, and they're influenced. They're listening to peers and reviews, and referrals way before they get to salespeople sometimes. They've advanced in the buying cycle. We hear from many sources that the customer is 57%, as high as 80% through the buying cycle. So where is the salesperson to fit in? How has that really changed that conversation that they have to have? Some of the other really important ones is that the clients are demanding proof of value. The clients are laser focused on getting business results, and they're highly risk adverse. So salespeople really have to understand what risk are they worried about and how do I mitigate it or at least make it tolerable. So it's a brand new buyer. The buyer is transformed and in sales, and this all happened very quickly. So sales organizations really, in many ways, didn't have time to get ready for this. It just happened, and many are scrambling to catch up.
So here's the impact slide. This is how that's impacting basically sales reps right now.
Right. And what we see is they have less time to sell. Before they had 80, 90, 100% of the sales cycle, and now it could be as low as 20 or 30% because the customer is advanced ahead. They're racing forward without the salesperson. Salespeople have to know where is their customer in their buying journey. We don't even know that now, and that's a major thing to find out. Their influence is decreased because there are social networks where they're really listening to peers. If they come late into the sales process, it impacts pricing because the customer can think, this salesperson is executing for me, but not really helping me solve this issue. I've done that without the salesperson. Salespeople have to figure out how to get in there earlier so they're not at the tail end of the sale. And critically important, they need much more knowledge and skills so they can bring insights and ideas because that is what clients are looking for. The other big thing is they're selling against silent voices. They don't even know what their customers know. In the past, they knew who their competitors were. They knew what the competitors were saying about themselves and about the salesperson's company. And now there are these silent voices out there, and salespeople simply don't have the knowledge unless they really are skilled in getting to customers and really understanding where they are in their buying journey.
I'm going to put up the 5 essential conversation changers. I wrote some cliff notes here, and then I'll turn it over to you before we go into the details, and that is that the featuring is for meta preparation. Heat mapping is diagnosing needs is no longer the conversation starter, which I thought was interesting. Value tracking is the outcomes and the financial impact. Phasing, clients control the sales process, but there's still a process needed. I thought that was an interesting comment from the book. And then linking was the emotional connection, the person to person, the importance of that. And you made a comment in the book, even though clients have unprecedented knowledge, they still face a lot of difficulty in sorting things out. So I think our conversation today is going to get a little more deeply into each of these items. But do you have any comments on this slide before we move on?
Normally in any of my books, if anyone has ever read them, I use very simple language normally. But in this book, I chose words that were much less obvious. And I did that to indicate we are really talking about a new sales language. Salespeople need to give up much of how they sold in the past. Realize needs are still critical. They're still central to understanding the customer's needs. But now to satisfy those needs, it's truly a different sale.
Yeah. On this first one about featuring, what I kind of picked up was that, in the past, you would ask about their business and you would tell them about your business. And today it's the discovery questions are met with a lot of impatience so that you have to go in prepared. So that's the meta preparation that we talked about just a minute ago.
Yes, exactly. I chose the word featuring because I think it indicated this huge change. In the past, salespeople really had to know, certainly they had to know their customer and certainly their industry and something about business. But the priority for them was to really understand their product, their competitor's product, and be able to differentiate and show product superiority. And today, that they need a high level of expertise, but not only their product and competitors' information, but they need business acumen. so they can really bring the kind of expertise and added value, because much of the information the customers can get for themselves, and they're certainly hearing a lot from other competitors. The other reason I chose futuring is because not only do they have to know current needs, which has always been the case, but the big change is now salespeople need to understand how to anticipate needs so they can get into the buying journey earlier to give them that advantage. And the customer really put it perfectly. They said, I can find 100 salespeople who can sell me a ladder after I fall in the hole. I'm looking for the one that can stop me from falling in. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for expertise. If I would say the things that customers want, and if you can deliver them, you will be successful. They want relevant expertise, and they want honest and open dialogue. And the third reason is when you look at the future, all research shows the people who do look to the future have more hope and energy. So that's why I chose that.
That's good. And then your thoughts here?
Yeah, and how do you do it? How do you get ready for this new sales conversation? And I've identified five areas of readiness. And the first is industry. There is absolutely no excuse not to be prepared. And that's what meta preparation is. In the past, salespeople couldn't prepare the way they could today. They didn't have the technology. It would take eons. And now, with a good half hour, 45 minutes, they can really understand things about the industry, about the company and the stakeholders. They need that readiness. They need sales tool readiness. Sales tools will change how they sell and can bring information and help build that expertise and help them connect better with their buyers. And finally, I call it being you ready, which means they have to brand themselves. You know, clearly, Luce said, the most important sentence in the world is, what is your sentence? And if you think about Steve Jobs, he put a dent in the universe. And every salesperson has to really look in the mirror and say, what is my sentence? Obviously, we're all multi-gifted, multi-talented, but that customer is going to think of you, and they're going to think of one thing. Is that the go-to person? Is that my industry specialist? Is that the financial one? You know, what do you want to be? How are you branding yourself? Because just as you're researching them in LinkedIn, they're researching you. So all of those things are a readiness at a very much higher level than salespeople needed in the past, particularly the industry knowledge. And you do all of that. Why? That expertise allows you to bring the magic word that we're hearing in selling today, insights. You're bringing insights, which helps the customer connect these 2 points they hadn't connected before and let them question the status quo. You know, insights are so powerful because they help clients make better decisions. They help clients become motivated for change. So the whole purpose of this is readiness.
We move on here to heat mapping, and I had just a couple of things I pulled out of the book that I thought the audience might find interesting. One is the clients want you to communicate with them, not at them. That was a gem. The clients want to be part of the revelation and solutions, not the recipients. And that while interrogation is over, consultative collaboration is not over. Let's talk a little bit about heat mapping.
Right. Well, you know, you really hit, the first one really hits home, because the problem with all the expertise that you've just done, you know, you've done all this research and you're really knowledgeable about the industry and the company and the stakeholders, and you've used your tools. There's a trap. A customer can think, gee, I have the answer. And in fact, they don't have the answer. What they have truly is a theory that needs to be tested. But customers are not very patient to be going into asking them all these discovery questions. So with heat mapping, you know, as with a heat map, it uses color to make it easy to understand information. So with heat mapping, you use an insight to start your questioning. So you give before you get. You bring value before you get. And I talk a lot in the book about how to develop insights and lots of examples. So you can start the dialogue with an insight and then get the customer's perception, not just go in with the insight and think you have the solution. And there are some schools of selling right now that are teaching that. Yes, you can go, you can be so prepared that you know everything, you can tell your customer what to do. I think it's a formula for failure. I think you need to go in with all of that insight, share something very relevant, and then get the magic question, how does the customer think about it? And So the next slide actually shows the difference of the two ways to ask questions. So here on the left-hand side, we have yesterday's model. And it was a good model. It served well for decades. But the key about this model is that it was looking for a product opportunity. And you ask questions that helped you understand and reach a product opportunity. With today's model, what we have is a learning and teaching model. And instead of start probing the opportunity, you start with the business challenge. So a good insight starts with the business challenge, offers some kind of research, gives an example, and then asks for the customer's perception. And that gets you into a business challenge conversation and not a product conversation, because customers are not interested today in coming in and hearing about products. They want to talk about their challenges and the outcomes, how to produce the outcomes they need. So the new model actually takes them there. I don't know if we have time for an example, but do we have a moment for an example, do you think?
Sure.
Okay, so let's say you're selling to a VP of sales, and you know that VP of sales is relatively new. The VP of sales, the team has not been making quota, so you would go in with an insight, and you know they've had sales training, but they haven't had coaching. So you might go in and start with the business challenge. Many of our clients are focused on helping their frontline managers become better coaches so that they can train people to close sales, and they don't have to go and close so many sales for their people. And research shows that the most effective way to increase productivity is through coaching. You can increase productivity by 20%, and quote who that research is from. And then you give an example. One of our clients, their sales force was achieving 47% of quota. Best-in-class companies are 69%. But after their managers went through coaching training, they are now 63%. And then comes the magic question. What has been your experience with your managers coaching your people? Or what's your perception about this kind of data? And then you're into a business conversation. That's the big, big switch in the new conversation. Once you're into that and you understand really what the customer's issues are and what they want to accomplish, then you don't give up on the model on the left-hand side. Now you can explore an opportunity that is a real opportunity and really connected to solving the business challenge.
You also said in the book, which I thought was a great line, you said, great selling is great teaching, I think it said, which I thought was a great line.
True. It's not insight selling. It's really teaching selling, and insight's part of it.
In this chapter, what I pulled out of this, which I tried to go through and just distill things down to what really spoke to me, was the clear connection between your solution, the desired business outcome, proof of past success, proof of value, and I'll let the readers know that when you have those questions, and you tell them what you want them to accomplish, but how do you accomplish that? And you have a value solution model starting on page 102 of your book that I thought was really good. But what are your other thoughts on this?
This really speaks to the gap between what conversations are going on from salespeople and what customers are interested in. And every customer has a scorecard. And if the value tracking is really putting your solution together, you've got to know what's on their scorecard. And in the past, if a solution weighed 1 pound, today it has to weigh 5 pounds, because there's so much more that you have to prove. And you have to make sure that your checklist goes against the customer's scorecard. And some of the things you mentioned, the very first thing is, how does this solution produce the business outcome? How does it address the business challenge? How is it mitigating risk? How am I proving value, financial value to this customer? How am I addressing the fact that they're buying with consensus, with group buying? Am I meeting the needs of the different buyers? So the solution really has to be pitched to the business challenge and not so much the product superiority or differentiation. That, of course, is a piece of it, but it's not the leader. You start with the end in mind. What is this customer trying to achieve?
Just one brief comment here was that if you fall behind or run ahead, the prospect won't wait or try to catch up. I thought that was a great summation of this chapter.
Well, best-in-class companies do have a defined sales process. And in the past, Dan, when clients would say, well, where should we start? I would always say with the managers. I don't say that anymore. I say, do you have a sales process? Most of them say yes, but when we look at it, it's really not a sales process. A defined sales process it's like the kernel. Everything comes from that. It becomes a way for salespeople to execute. It becomes a way for managers to coach. It increases forecasting accuracy. So whether the sales process has 5 stages or 6 stages, it needs to align with how the customers buy. And I put a lot of that and give some examples of that in the book. But at the end of the day, for every single stage in the sales process, it should be defined what's the objective of that stage, what are the sales activities, and those sales activities are based on best practices. And yesterday I spoke with a client, and we all know best practices come from going to your best performers and to some research and say, well, what are the best performers doing? And why have every salesperson try to reinvent the wheel? Why not help them? Why not give them a roadmap to how to move through a sale? The interesting thing here is the client was telling me, and he's written an article about it, so I'm not sharing, confidential information. They have found with their research, very intensive, a very large company, that the best practices come out of the best teams. It's from the team that's practicing the highest that you actually get the variables that make that team so high. And they've actually defined that. And the first thing, and I'll share with you what was number one across a very large organization consistently, is knowing what's expected of them. And a sales process is part of that, to define it. People want to know what shall I do? Give me some guidance. And then the coaching to support that. So it needs the sales activities, the client outcome. What does the client have to do before you move to stage 2? What does the client have to do in stage 2 so you can move to stage 3? So you don't have a pipe dream, you have a real pipeline. And then what are the models? And then also the coaching questions to go with each phase. So for instance, if we're in phase 3, and that's where the customer's assessing value, they're thinking, if I do this, is it really worth it? And the salesperson's working very hard to prove value. These are some of the questions, such as, how does your solution solve the business challenge? How are you going to prove value in financial terms? See what else was some key ones. Oh, what risk is the client concerned about? How are you mitigating it? So you can actually put coaching questions that salespeople can ask themselves, or their managers, their frontline managers, team leaders can ask them.
Mm-hmm. The fifth item, the last item, linking, there was a great quote from the book. Aberdeen Group research continues to reinforce how important it is to create client intimacy. And I thought this was actually a really interesting chapter. You have a couple of additional quotes here and other thoughts, I'm sure.
Well, this is almost the trickiest. Linking is almost the trickiest because this is the one salespeople take for granted. Yes, I'm a people person. Sure, I relate to my clients. But connecting emotionally, it has a different tone right now because there's a lot of skepticism out there. There's a lot of noise, a lot of information. And I love this quote by David Kelly, the founder of IDEO. He said, the most important thing in business is to be human-centered. We all know what it is to be client-centered. But do we really think about being human-centered? What does it take? And then David Brooks, who is one of my all-time favorites, says that emotions can dislodge deeply formed conclusions. So we have to think, salespeople have to think, how much attention are they paying to connecting emotionally with their customers? it takes attention. What does it take? We know, every 2 years on average, companies are looking for new providers. Why? Yes, price, yes, performance, yes, what's on the scorecard. But there's two things that are never in an RFP, that are never on the scorecard explicitly: heart and trust. And, we know salespeople sell with drive, but do they sell with heart? And I love this one quote by David Brooks when he said, the successful performers in the age of technology will sell with heart in hand. So I think this is really thinking about, how do we build trust? How do we truly connect beyond just delivering what we promise, but that real connection, because that is going to be the differentiator. Salesperson is the differentiator. Yes.
No, I'll put up our contact information here, Linda, and I wanted to summarize a couple of questions that came in. I guess you mentioned 57%, and there's other pundits out there, I guess I will call them, that says as much as 70% of the sales process is complete before a sales rep needs to get involved. And I think you have to kind of counterbalance that thinking against exactly what kind of sale is this. If you're talking about a relatively strategic item, let's say it's a new ERP or it's a $1 million genome testing piece of equipment, which is one of our clients sells, then a lot of times it's important to get in early as opposed to waiting into getting in too late. How do you kind of balance that education that the companies do, the prospects do, prior to your getting involved, against trying to get positioned early in accounts so that you can really define the evaluation as opposed to just respond to the evaluation?
I'll take that in two parts. First, to get in early is very important, and that's where all the futuring. That's what futuring is all about. And it's really the marketing departments need to step up to the plate. They really need to help salespeople, give them knowledge sharing, critically important. If they've solved a problem for one customer, have they shared that across the organization so another salesperson can appropriate it and help another customer bring in an idea? That's what bringing in insights and ideas are all about, because they really percolate ideas in a customer's mind. You can bring an insight that adds to what a customer knows already, or you can bring in something they're not thinking about yet. And when you do that, then you have the advantage. But if you do get in later, because the customers are very smart. They're working hard at those whiteboards. They're trying to figure things out too. So if you do get in later, don't think they don't need you, because there's a lot of noise out there. Number one, you don't know what they know. You have to find out what they know. And second of all, you don't know the quality of what they know. So you really need to go in and understand that and be able, and in those cases, find a way to add value and to give them a perspective, to connect 2 points that they haven't thought of. It differentiates you so that the customer thinks at the end of the day, this is the person I want to execute with.
Mm-hmm. Linda, I know, having written a book myself, that it's exhausting work, and you just finished this one. I think it was published in January, is that right? Do you have another book up your sleeve here that you can tell us about, or are you giving yourself a little rest?
Well, I'm actually thinking about a new coaching book, a very different kind of coaching book that incorporates sales process with coaching and performance review with coaching. So I think that in the new world, we're going to see those almost without dividing lines.
Well, thank you. Any closing thoughts before we say goodbye to the audience?
My book is a how-to book, and shelves are full of how-to books. I think the real important thing, change. Salespeople really want to change, and they want to be the absolute best they can be. That's why it doesn't start with the how-to book. That really starts with the commitment, the intent, the desire to be the best they can be. So I think if they have that, then find the books that can help them, find the mentors and resources that can help them do that.
Well, thank you. We'll look forward to your new book when you get time to do it. And thanks so much for joining me on PowerViews Live today. I really appreciate it. For now, this is Dan McDade signing off on another edition of PowerViews Live. Thank you.